Well, hello and welcome to Z-Day 2013 Maidstone. This is the first event of its kind to occur here in Kent, and as such it's an honour to be hosting, as well as extremely thankful to all of you for coming. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Z-Day is the global annual awareness day for the Zeitgeist movement, where we hold events to give presentations, screenings and answer questions. It is my hope to represent this train of thought as best I can. Now, before I get too deep into this, I will give my usual disclaimer, which is, don't believe a single word I say. Instead, use what I'm saying as inspiration to do your own research and arrive at your own conclusions. It's a good idea to take notes, as many as you like, because we will be getting through quite a bit of information in the following 3 hours. So if there's anything you wish clarification or expansion on, I've devoted the last hour to Q&A, so it's best time to bring up your concerns. However, if you ask me something and I give an answer that doesn't completely make sense, then don't settle for that. Or either make a note to research it further, or alternatively, just drop it. Even if I have an oppositional view, I accept the possibility that I may hold inaccurate information, so I give stuff a chance when I hear someone out. But I send it through my logical faculties. If it passes through, then I take it on board. If it doesn't make logical sense, then I discard it. So what is the Zeitgeist movement, or TZM? Essentially, it's a global grassroots advocacy group. As the name suggests, Zeitgeist, meaning spirit of the age, from the German translation, but we term it as the dominant cultural mindset. And movement, meaning motion or change. It is our task to educate society to the current system's inherent unsustainability, in addition to how a viable solution can be sought through the transition to sustainable systems. Or in other words, to urge for a motion or change from the dominant cultural mindset. Overall, the name the Zeitgeist movement only exists as an identifier. It's ultimately of no real importance exactly what the name is, because the focal point of TZM is the advocation of a scientific worldview, a train of thought that is summed up by the following phrase: the scientific method applied to social and environmental concern. While we were affiliated with a similar organisation called the Venus Project, which we still wholeheartedly support, they have blueprints and designs for what they know the future could look like, but not what the future should look like. This is important to look into because even when taking the fleeting glances at their wonderful designs, they're an insight into what is possible. We at TZM, however, no longer hold any allegiance to any singular organisation or individual personality. We are loyal to the train of thought itself. Whatever that train of thought creates is what we need to aim for. Some of you may be thinking, why the grassroots movement? Why not a political party? Since we live in a society governed by politics, surely it seems the logical step, right? Well, while I recognise that there is some merit and possibility for at least getting exposure for this train of thought by putting our hat in the political ring, we recognise that a candidate for such progressive ideology will likely never be embraced within the current system. For those who think that lobbying to the existing governmental structure as small groups of individuals or organisations is going to achieve anything, then I'm sorry, but I can't see that happening. The current structure of governance is not there to move society forward. It's there to maintain the status quo, to maintain power, and keep all of you in line, to ensure their continued power. If they really cared about us, then how come we still have to work for a living? How come we have ever-escalating debts that we, the taxpayers, are being held accountable for? How come we have all these problems which we are never seeing a solution being advocated for by the establishment? It's all about damage control, about reduction of waste, reduction of CO2 emissions, reduction of debt, reduction of crime. Because they can't actually admit to themselves, let alone you, that the monetary system needs those things. Because within those problems emerges profitable industries and profitable patchwork solutions, and thus also a healthy GDP. And if you solve a problem that is profitable to service, then bye-bye goes the profit and down goes the GDP. That is why no actual solutions are advocated, because they eradicate the ability to make money. The minute you see any politician in power talking about the eradication of any of those things through technical solutions, then you would be under the power of a caring and progressive government. Therefore, the only way to affect the current political system is to force its hand. How do we do that? Very simple. Through what is known as critical mass and parallel government. Now, I will expand more into the ideas of parallel government later, but in regards to critical mass, then that is one of the most effective and direct methods for social change we have devised. Because the thing is, we need to remember that it is we, the people, who derive the power. It is our collective voice which determines the shifting tide of perception. Here's the point of contention, though. The establishment have duped you into thinking that voting gives you power. There's a wonderful analogy that Stéphane Molyneux, the host of Free Domain Radio, gives when he's talking about voting. He likens it to a game of keep away, where two kids snatch an item of property from a smaller kid and toss it back and forth, forcing the kid in the middle to run and beg for their property back. It's a perfect analogy, because just like in that schoolyard game, what you cherish has been stolen from you, and you're forced to have to run back and forth between two individuals and beg for it back. And eventually it is given back to us, but only in little scraps. Who here can recite Article 21 of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Anyone? I quote, "The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government." Raise your hand if the authorities have ever done something against your will or something that you would not have consented to. Well, there we go. We don't actually live in a free democratic society then, do we? Sorry. Politics has utterly failed in providing us with the means to achieve a sustainable world. Case closed. So what other method of decision making do we have that can actually provide that kind of world? We call it science. But more specifically, the scientific method. Now, pardon the pun, but this isn't rocket science. It's a four-step process. A hypothesis based upon analysis of the available data. That hypothesis is tested. The results of said testing is collated. Then a conclusion is drawn. This process is repeated as necessary until the empirical facts at that point in time are deduced. Now, I know that to some of you this may sound a bit too specialised and only for the laboratory. However, can anyone tell me how we learned to walk if it wasn't for the scientific method? Okay, and when you think about it, the scientific method is responsible for the building you're sitting in right now, the mobile in your pocket, the engine in your car, and everything else that makes our lives possible and at the standard of living we enjoy. It has helped provide all those things that we owe our lives to it. Many of you, myself included, wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for the scientific method. However, for all the progress, all the innovation, all the leaps and bounds we have made because of science, there is still one facet of our lives that we resist the notion of applying the scientific method, our socio-economic system. Now, I can understand if such an idea may come off as unrealistically space age. However, that's like saying that the entire planet looks like the Houses of Parliament because the dominant method for decision making is so-called democratic government. When we think about this proposed idea, we should refer to what a resource-based economy is in a nutshell: the application of the scientific method to social and environmental concern to arrive at decisions. That's it. It's the operant mentality and gravitation of that society. Instead of using human opinion and money to make decisions, we instead use science. How will that kind of world look? Well, that we can project, but we cannot tell for sure since we don't know exactly what science will enable by then. However, when we apply science to social and economic orientation, we instantly see what needs to be done and how. All the rest is up to us. Whether we heed the fact that we live in a world which cannot sustain an infinite growth paradigm is the test of whether we can. Right now, I can imagine some of you may seem to to some of you, I may seem like maybe a dreamer, maybe a utopian Marxist. How about a Satanistic technocrat? Or maybe just a plain loon? Well, besides the fact that I've been called all of those things and more, I assure you that neither have any basis. First off, the pejorative dreamer is applied to any person who is perceived to have an unrealistically idealistic view of the world or the future. However, I urge you to take a moment to think back through human history, to all those wonderful and progressive geniuses who devoted their lives to making the world a better place, or creating a new invention, pushing for an ideological shift, or curing disease. You can rest assured that they were all called dreamers in their own time. Now take a moment to consider what kind of world we would have right now if they had heeded their critics and stopped being so brilliant. Yeah, it's not such a pleasant view, is it? We desperately need dreamers, because how else are we supposed to wake up? And I know I'm in good standing because being one, because in the words of John Lennon, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. The phrase utopia is bandied about quite a bit by people who oppose changes as well. However, virtually none of these people truly understand what the word itself implies. It implies a fixed end state of perfection. However, the reality is that we live in a world that is emergent, meaning that everything from the movements of the cosmic bodies all the way down to human thoughts, beliefs and understandings are always in constant change. The paradox, as it were, is that change is one of the only absolutes. So with that in mind, how could we achieve a fixed end state of perfection? We can't, because nature says different. Marxist and similarly communist is also a common label thrown at people like myself. However, just like with the utopian label, people don't completely understand what they mean by Marxism. As such, one thing I try to do first off is to get them to define their terms. Once you have their definition, you can then address that. However, Marx, while correct in quite a few ways, was still stagnant within an established framework of human labour, currency, classes, military and police forces, and pretty much everything that existed in capitalism during the early 20th century, except it was supposedly the working class or the proletariat who had the power. Satanism, contrary to what most people believe, is actually not the worship of Satan, but rather the belief that the individual is a deity. That freedom emerges from the embracing one's own messianic qualities, kind of like a theistic hedonism. While such an ideology could be appreciated for its self-fortuitous merits, it's still an ism, an established ideology which resists change. The scientific method is diametrically opposed to this notion because it clings to nothing and is always trying to prove itself wrong so it can change all the time. As Tim Minchin's once said, science adjusts its views based on what's observed. Faith is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. Technocracy is one of the less common labels we receive. However, the two main differences is the very limited projected geographical application, that being probably most of one continent, whereas a resource-based economic model is a global system, and technocracy was characterized by the use of a monetary system of energy coupons. I suppose the similarity between the two systems is that, as the name suggests, the structure of power is derived from technology, or rather individuals who were trained in those fields. However, in a resource-based economic model, anyone can become part of the interdisciplinary teams because the vast ease of access to information for education. As for loon, well, I think that's just an ad hominem fallacy, really, so I wouldn't really pay too much heed. So, with the introduction out of the way now, I'll allow you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some short videos.